This is Moon Shrimp Cake, and it's my interpretation of Dungeon Munchies' fictional version. I'll try to explain my recipe with reasoning and proof without giving away too much of the lore. The game has us come back to life deep underground in a dungeon which humanity built and inhabited to ensure survival. Despite their best efforts, mankind presumably goes extinct. An unknown amount of time passes, but enough years go by that nature has reclaimed most of the dungeon, and here we are, thanks to Simmer. Simmer is a spirit who specializes in necromancy and cooking, and she resurrects us, the main character, to help her retrieve the missing chapters of a cookbook she and her friends worked on before they passed. Before I can replicate this food, we need to examine a few things to ensure authenticity. Lucky for me, there is a real-world equivalent, Thai-styled moon shrimp cake. Despite the name, this dish actually originated in Taiwan, which exactly reflects the dungeon's theme. The Chinese signage and the food stations were designed after Taiwan's night markets. Hundreds of vendors serve cheap, delicious food, but usually in smaller portions. It's not enough to be a proper meal, but it's still more than what you'd get from just a snack. So think of it like buying hot dogs on the street. You can sometimes find these night markets specialize in one particular type of food that is unique to that area. Moon shrimp cake isn't the only food from the game that is inspired by Taiwan's night markets. Beef noodle soup and oyster omelet resemble the game's braised tea beef and bullseye omelet respectively. Now that I know what style of cooking and the kind of recipe I'll be referencing, I need to interpret the ingredients used. We have the cookbook only listing 2 items, slime and shrimp meat. To better understand what went into this dish, I took a closer look into the dungeon's environment and Simmer's background. Most of her life is kept hidden from us, but what we do learn is she likely learned the basics of cooking from her uncle. Unfortunately, his memory really isn't there. He can't even recognize his niece anymore. Despite rambling on about how he taught 2 girls to boil water, chill water, and drink water, he was a very accomplished cook in his life. He owned and ran a breakfast eatery that was so popular, government officials didn't tear down his establishment when cooking became illegal. He specialized in danbing, which is a Taiwanese egg crepe, and that requires more skill than just boiling water. With this information, it can be safely assumed that he taught Simmer how to cook when she first started, and that means she probably also learned how to catch the same type of shrimp he was after. The in-game text states that the shrimp is very deadly due to its extremely sharp claws which can cut you at the slightest touch. This somehow reminded me of one episode from Andrew Zimmern's Bizarre Foods, which has him go and explore Taiwan.
Let me make sure there's a hospital nearby.
These are mantis prawns, shallow diving ambush predators with forearms that can leave customers gnashed and bleeding. Deadly. Absolutely deadly.
Now, on to the more tricky part, slime. I was pretty uncertain how I could come up with a real-world equivalent. How would it taste? How could you work with the texture? What purpose does it serve in this recipe? The cookbook details slime being used to make something that looks like hard candy which resembles grass jelly, and slime is also used to make dragon fruit jelly. This leads me to believe slime is basically gelatin. It makes sense if you also consider that dead slimes can be found on drying racks. Gelatin is made from animal collagen, which is a protein found in connective tissues such as tendons and ligaments. So basically, something like bones or animal skin is boiled, dried, and then treated with either an acid or base. Afterwards, it goes through several filters so collagen is extracted. It is then dried and ground into a powder and sifted to make gelatin. So perhaps the reason that slimes are found on drying racks is because they are being extracted for their collagen. Simmer explains that slimes typically have strong digestions, so it could be a great source of collagen depending on what the diet was like. The first thing is to make the gel stock. In goes 1 packet of gelatin into half a cup of stock and leave it in for 5 minutes. Afterwards, microwave the cup of gelatin for 1 minute and stir, and then again, microwave it for 1 minute and stir. Once dissolved, I transfer the stock into a shallow heat-proof container and refrigerate it until it fully set, which was about 30 minutes. In the meantime, I prepared the shrimp mixture. Pat dried the shrimp and added to the food processor along with the seasonings, cornstarch, green onion, garlic, and egg white. Process the ingredients to get a very fine paste. After 30 minutes have passed, check on the gelatin and carefully remove it from the container. Then very finely mince it and add the cubes of gelled stock to the shrimp mixture. Here I'm adding a thin layer of shrimp paste onto a spring roll wrapper. I forgot I had a brush, but I'm using an egg wash to help seal the second wrapper. And that's pretty much it. Should you try this, and if you work slow, you may want to refrigerate the shrimp paste to prevent the gelled stock from melting. Here's where things didn't go according to plan. I suspected the gelled stock would melt, but I didn't expect it to seep through the wrapper. Cooking on one side worked fine enough, but cooking on the other side was not working. The stock would cause the wrapper to fuse to the pan. I tried frying on one side and then steaming the top, but the end result wasn't any better. I still preferred the crunch when it was fried on both sides, even if the seal had been broken. It tasted pretty good, but unless I can figure out on how to keep the gelled stock from seeping through, I think a normal shrimp pancake would suffice. In retrospect, I think I could have made it work had I baked the cakes instead, but I'll hold off on that for another day.